Welcome to the Run Fast, Run Forever podcast presented by Lever Movement. Thanks for joining today. Today we speak with Mike Foppen. He is a Dutch Olympian and four-time national record holder who comes on the podcast today to give his year in review, the setbacks and injuries that he went through this last year and how he has coped with those and also overcome those to set himself up for a very solid Olympic cycle. He's racing multiple times coming up in the next few weeks. So we hope you enjoy this podcast and also learn a little bit about how an elite runner can just tap into that mental and psychological side and really just deliver the best results possible on race day. Thanks for joining.
3, 2, 1, yeah!
Hi, Mike Foppen. Thanks for joining us today on the Lever Podcast.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Just wanted to spend this time with you. Obviously, diving into last year, big year with the Olympic year coming up as well. So, love to talk through that. But before we do that, we start off every single one of these podcasts with the question of what is the why behind why you run?
That's a good question. Well, for me, it kind of started because I had a lot of talent. I think a lot of guys get into running or into elite level sports like that. So you basically start liking what you're good at. That's what I had. But actually now it kind of changed. It's become my whole lifestyle. So I feel like I'm a little bit of like I live in a bubble, in this running bubble, and I don't want to come out of it. So I love being in the bubble and everything. I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to like everything related to running. So I think that's why I do it. I just love the world, and also to be able to make your hobby kind of your work. I mean, I don't do it for like as a work. It doesn't feel like work to me, but still to be able to live from it and like travel all over the world. That's really why I do it.
I love it. Yeah. And you mentioned, you're pretty good at it from a young age. Obviously now 4-time national record holder. So pretty good. Obviously 3K, 5K, was that indoor and outdoor 5K, and then the road 10K?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
National records. So let's dive into just kind of when did you start running? Was it a sport for you all the way from like a youth, or did you play other sports and just realize you were faster than all the other kids?
Well, I started playing soccer, as they would say in the US. We say football. And I kind of noticed already then that they basically put me in the midfield, and I was just running back and forth without the ball. So I was really good without the ball, but not really with the ball. So I could kind of see we had to do these tests like soccer skills, football skills, and I was only good at the running part. So I kind of noticed that maybe running should be my sport. And then I first did athletics, like in general, so all the events. But I was a pretty like long and skinny guy, so all the other events, they were not really my thing. Actually, I think sprinting was all right. I was all right at that. But mostly the long distance, or it was like 600 meters back then, were a bit more my events. But it's been a really long time. I'm now 27, and I think I started maybe when I was 7. So I think I'm 20 years in already. Wow. Yeah, it's been a long time.
2 decades in the sport already. And honestly, you still have a long runway ahead of you. So that's got to be pretty exciting.
Yeah.
No. And so, like I said, you're a 4-time national record holder for the Dutch, and you went to the Olympics in Tokyo. What do you see ahead of you right now that you still want to achieve in the sport?
Well, I've never made a global final. So I competed in Tokyo, but I had to drop out with an injury in the heat. I don't think I would have made the final, but I didn't even get the chance to try. Then I didn't qualify for global championship in 2022. I missed out on world champs. And then 2023 last year was my first like global world champs. And there I missed out on a few places for the final. So that's something really that's on my bucket list. And of course, running sub 13 in the 5K, it's like kind of a magical barrier. A lot of more guys are doing it nowadays, but I never thought that it would be a realistic goal. But now I'm coming so close that it's not just a dream anymore, but it's really like the next like short-term goal. So that would be really nice. But I just like the idea that I'm 27 and I've been in the sport for 20 years and I'm still improving. So I'm still making steps forward. And that's something really special, I would say.
Yeah. And you mentioned your 5K time, 13:05. I believe it's the time I saw for you there. And so how do you find those, 5, 6 seconds to get under 13?
Well, I think in 5K it's already really hard to find a good race. So you got to be a bit lucky with the day itself. Like the conditions need to be perfect. The race needs to fit well. So actually, when I ran my national record and PB, I wasn't in the best shape, but the race was just really good. And I've had the other way around as well, where I was in really good shape, but I couldn't find the right race. So I think there is definitely some gain. And I've started with a new coach about 3 years back, 2 years back, and I think that a switch like that also takes time to pay off. So I feel like I actually, since maybe 1.5 years, I've been like steadily progressing again. If I look at my training. So yeah, I'm really curious about this summer because I think I'm at the moment at a level where I'm better than I was last year. So
Hmm.
I think in training, in just total approach, I used to get sick a lot in the winter, like small, not really sick, but just like small colds, which would interrupt me a lot. So we made some different choices this winter of doing less races, not doing any championships. I used to do always cross country championships and indoor championships. But I skipped both of those just to like train through the whole winter and get the body like as fresh as possible going into the outdoor season.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. So would you say then, especially giving up like cross champs and a few other indoor races, that is Paris like pretty high then on the list this year as like priorities?
Yeah, so I think this summer for most Europeans, it will be first European Championships in Rome. Will be beginning of June, so actually coming up in like two,
Mhm.
3 weeks. So it's pretty soon. And then of course Olympics. So I'm not 100% qualified yet for Olympics, but I'm really high on the ranking, and I have the 13:05. So like if I'm high enough on the ranking, I will be selected by the Dutch like Olympic committee. Um, so I feel pretty safe about Olympics. I'm basically preparing Olympics as if I'm already qualified, because yeah, I feel very sure about qualifying. So
Yeah, and that's great that your body's like bouncing back so well after on your Instagram you kind of talk through the year of setbacks of 2023. Um and so it's great to see that your body's bounced back so well. Can you kind of walk us through 2023 and like yeah, what were those setbacks, and how did they define the season?
yeah, it was a little bit of a weird season because, like I said, the like you build up towards the summer. That's for me at least as a being a track athlete, like the most important month. So it starts like let's say half of May and ends maybe in September. So those 3-4 months are really the most important months of the year. And the World Champs was beginning of August, I think. So that was the main goal last year. And yeah, I came into the season like best shape ever, 100%. I did things in workouts I've never done before, and felt very confident that I was really gonna like smash all my personal records. Um, but then I did one race, 1500-meter race in Belgium. Very good season open. I was really happy with that. And then 3 days later, it kind of seemed like my whole season was already over because I was doing the workout and I felt something snapping next to my Achilles tendon. Um, so for a second, I thought it was the Achilles tendon and that really the season was over. It was also really painful at one specific spot, so I really thought I
Mm.
tore like a part of the tendon. Turned out there was like a really small tendon next to Achilles tendon, which was a bit unclear how long it would take, but it ended up taking only like 10 days to 2 weeks out of my training. But that starts the season already really weird because you basically start with an injury and you don't really know how long it's gonna take. And then after that, I decided to go back to training and like focus on the longevity of the season. So focus on World Champs basically. Decided after 4 weeks to start another 5K, try a 5K just to see where I was at, and that's when I ran the 13:05. So it
Mm.
really came as a surprise. I went into the race with the thought maybe I can run 30 minutes 25, something like that, just like as a good test. But like I said, the race was perfect, and there was something magical that day because a lot of guys ran really fast. And that's really what happens in racing. Sometimes there's these magical nights with magical conditions and a good race. Those things can happen then. And then after that, I got problems with my other tendon. So it was a really weird season where I had a lot of ups with the national record and making it to world champs, but also actually a bit too many injuries.
Did you uh, did you have a couple other like Achilles issues in your past, or was that a pretty new injury for you last year?
No, it was very strange to me because I've actually never had problems with my Achilles tendons.
Hmm.
Well, stiff calves. I used to struggle a lot with my calves, but not really with the tendons itself. So it was kind of a surprise to me that it was getting so bad. But apparently, that's what I've been told by doctors is that if one tendon gets irritated, it comes like these like inflammatory stuff in the tendon, so it might trigger the other tendon as well if that one is also a bit annoyed. Um, and I think like going down in mileage, not having your spikes on, and then going up to racing, and then down again and up to racing, it's hard on the body. So I guess we're always balancing on a thin line when it comes to injuries and training. But I think I went not too far, I would say, but I just took a lot of risks last year, and it's part of the game. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you did get a national record out of last year. And I'd love to tap into that for a second because, like you said, you ran your national record after taking 10, 12 days off before that. And then I think you said you had like 3 weeks or so to ramp up, if I got the timeline right. So you had about a month from your 1500 to that 5K. Is that right?
yeah, I think it was about 5 weeks. Yeah.
5 weeks or so. What did you do anything in particular, like, or specifically in those like 3 or so weeks to get you ready for that 13:05 5K?
Well, I had to take like 10 days off running
Mhm.
with the injury. Did a lot of cross training just on the bike, on the pool, nothing special, just getting my hours in. Because I knew if it only takes 2 weeks and I can just keep these 2 weeks as maintenance, then I'll be fit like by no time. So basically, I think after 11 days, I ran for the first time again on an alter G, and that was a like successful test. And then I said to my coach the day after, I'm going to altitude. I said the moment I can run again, I want to go to altitude and like build up the shape again. And that's exactly what I did. So I basically, well, I went to altitude straight after. Maybe ran one week of 80 kilometers, 1 week of maybe 100, one of 120, getting a little bit of quality back in there, and then I ran 13:05. So I think it was in the body still from all the work I did before. I just needed to get like the body fresh enough to race and like get a little bit of quality back in.
Yeah, and I guess you made a point there too, which makes a lot of sense, is when you say taking 10, 12 days off, it doesn't really mean off for you guys. At the elite level, you're still
No,
how like what did your I mean, obviously you couldn't load the tendon, but how 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 long did you spend in the pool, like aqua jogging?
oh, I would say I trained more when I was injured than when I was not injured. I think that's for a lot of runners. That's the most painful thing when getting injured is knowing that you have to probably spend twice as much hours on doing your job.
Yeah.
So not only like the rehabilitation exercises and everything that comes around it, the physio treatments, which is already a lot of hours extra a week. It's just known that on a bike you need to get more hours in to get kind of, that's what they say, kind of the same training effect.
Mhm.
I like to just take the bike also for an hour and just like go all out for an hour. Like
Mhm.
I prefer that than going for 4 hours and having a very low heart rate. Um, but yeah, it is. I think maybe with running, I spent 12 to 14 hours a week running, and like alternative training was probably like 20, more like 20 hours a week, at least 2 to 3 hours a day. So
Yeah, and you mentioned, your first run back was an Alter G. What percentage of body weight do you remember what you ran at for that first
I
run
think it
back?
was eight. I think it was 80%, and then
Okay.
maybe like five times 2 minutes. It was really just a test, nothing like for the cardio. So what I did, I did a bike workout. Then I went to the altitude, did the 5 times 2, or not really a workout. I warmed up the body by doing like 45 minutes on the bike. Then I went to the altitude, and then I still had to go to the pool after that because the 5 times 2 minutes was just to test the tendon, but it was not actually training.
Right, right. So no pain on that run with
Mm,
80%?
No, it's like that was the good thing. I never had any setbacks. So from like day zero that I started running again, I could really like progress pretty fast.
Yeah, no, that sounds like it. And so did you go back to essentially all body weight runs after that for the 3 weeks to get ready for your 5K?
Yeah, so I think I spent 2 more days on the AlterG and then took the car to Formeux in France, the altitude, and then stayed there for like 19 days total, I think.
Okay.
And then came back down for the race. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, successful 5K. Sounds like a good race to get a national record. And then you mentioned a couple days later you started feeling the other Achilles.
Oh, it was a little bit later. So I did some other races after that in the month after maybe. And then basically when I started doing my final phase of preparation before World Championships, so this is like July, I went to Paris because that's where my coach and group is based. And I was doing a really hard workout there. And then I started feeling it in a session. And it was like sometimes you get a feeling or a pain during a session and you kind of feel like, okay, this is going to be sore tomorrow, but it's nothing big. But I had to stop the workout before finishing it and like couldn't do cool down after, then you kind of know that it's serious. Um, and also not the same pain as I had felt before. So this really felt like the Achilles tendon, which was just very, very annoyed. Um, and after that, I think I had from that day I had 16 days or like 14 days until the heats at World Champs, and then it was just like a lot of up and down. So like 2 days no running, and then it starts to feel better. So you're like, oh, I'm gonna try a session again, and then 2 days no running. That's how I kind of tried to prepare.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough way to prepare heading into obviously world champs, right? You want your body to be at the peak that it can be at. So in those 2 weeks, 2 days off, 1 day on. Your days on, were you doing like essentially quality sessions or mainly just like longer runs just to get some aerobic work in?
No, I think like in those last 2 weeks before a race, you just want to kind of do what you were supposed to do, take out like the easy runs maybe. So you want to get as sharp as possible
Mhm.
without making it too bad so you can't run, but it's also not going to go away. You have to be realistic then and say to yourself, okay, the next 2 weeks I'm going to have to run with pain, and the race will also be painful. But like that's a risk I was willing to take because I knew that after that the season was going to be over anyway. I was hoping, of course, that with 2 days off, 1 day session, 2 days off, that it would get better. But it didn't really get better. It got even a little bit worse, I would say. So I was, yeah, like you said, I was doing 2 days on the bike or in the pool, and then 1 day like on the track, not with spikes because I didn't want to like totally
Mhm.
like make it worse. But I was doing some kind of sessions as well. But most of the sessions were already shorter than they were supposed to be, and then I could only do 60% of them anyway. So it was
Mhm.
really a bit trial and error. And that's not really. It gives a lot of insecurities before a championship like that.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely plays into the mental side of things when you're trying to get ready for big races. Did
Yeah.
you and your coach at all talk ever about trying to do some of these quality sessions at a lower body weight?
We've talked about it, but I think we would have done that if we would have a little bit more time. So say we'd have a month, we would do that for maybe 2 weeks and then go back to like running outside. But we were in the final phase, so we just tried to work with what we had. And I did get a lot of checkups from the doctors there, and they said like we don't see any risk of long-term damage. So they said it will still probably take you like 4 to 6 weeks after World Champs to get rid of it, but it
Mhm.
would take 4 to 6 weeks at that moment as well. So they were like, you're just gonna prolong it by 2 weeks, and it's not gonna be nice because it's painful.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think also, well, I think all runners have once ran with pain. It's just running gets really, really a lot less fun when you feel some pain somewhere. Um, so the enjoyment side of things was not really there, and it's hard to have that in a final phase. But
Yeah, and I'm kind of curious, like, how did you mentally bounce back from? So you obviously started 2023, like you mentioned, fittest shape of your life, like ready just to take on the world, and then once racing started, it feels like obviously some setbacks and just some ups and downs in your training. Like, how are you doing mentally at that point? And like, what did you know was there anything that you kind of had to do from a mental aspect to make sure you were ready to compete?
well, I would say that first injury, I was surprised about myself because I was very relaxed about it. So the one earlier in the season after the first race, I didn't have much stress about that one, but I think that was also because I didn't have a lot of pain. So it was very painful in the moment, but then the last 2 days, the pain got a lot less. And if you walk down the stairs, you walk from the couch to the garden, whatever, if you constantly get reminded by this pain next to the Achilles tendon, it really brings down the mood. But if you don't feel it much and you can do your training just not running, I think the general mental state is a lot better. The second one was a lot harder because I was in Paris, like I said, and yeah, I was alone there in the room, so alone on the bike. Saw my training partner Jimmy Greshey. He was doing all of his workouts and he was really getting ready for World Champs, so that was a bit harder. But also after that, I mean, I got to World Champs. The last 2 days, I was running, I was jogging, I could do some strides. Finally, put on my spikes for the first time. And yeah, I was pretty self-confident actually, just because of the last time. What had happened was that I couldn't run for 2 weeks, and I still ran well. So I was still pretty confident, I would say. And I just wanted to be competitive. So you don't want to go to World Champs and just like run around knowing that you either not gonna make the finish or you're gonna finish like really far behind. So the fact that I could be competitive and was there with like 200 meters to go to fight for a final spot, that made me very positive. And yeah, I don't know. I think being 27 years old or 26 then, and having dropped out of the heats in Tokyo, there's not much like hardship or heartbreak that I can have, I would say. I think that was really my my deepest low, dropping out at your first Olympics. So then running around with pain in your Achilles standing at World Championships heats, but still be competitive doesn't sound as bad anymore.
Yeah. And to be in it with 200 to go has to
Exactly.
leave you with a ton of encouragement. You know, like you said,
Yeah.
you're 26. You got a lot of racing ahead of you as well. Did Achilles recovery start like right after that race? Like did you take some time off, begin that 4 to 6 week kind of off period?
Well, I actually made one more mistake after World Champs. So I got invited to run Zurich Diamond League, which is kind of it's a big deal. It's a big race, a chance I would normally not get. So I was like calling with my coach saying, yeah, I haven't run since World Champs. The 3 days after the race, it was like a week after World Champs. Started jogging a bit again, was like, okay, maybe it's not that bad. Started taking like anti-inflammation pills again. Was like, oh, it's maybe all right. So I went there and tried to race. I thought if I could get the Olympic standard for next year, because the shape was kind of there, that would be amazing. I thought then I can go to next year and feel like have everything sorted. But that was a mistake. I had to drop out after already 4 laps. I was doing the strides the day before the race and I couldn't put on my spike. So it was a risk and it didn't pay off. But also then it was like, I'm just going to prolong the recovery process by a week, but it doesn't make it worse. So I tried. But yeah, after that, I did take some time off. I think I took 10 days of nothing. But for me, 10 days of nothing is not nothing because I'm an active person. So even on holiday, I would go out on walks or whatever. And then mostly, I think for the rehabilitation, it was mostly the exercises that really helped for my tendons. So you got to build up, of course. I started doing alternative training first, I think. So not directly running. I really wanted 3 full weeks of running. Then started building that up with the lever. Actually, that's where the lever got involved as well. I borrowed it from another runner I know, and that really helped me in the build up by just increasing the mileage, but being able to keep it under control. So that's the whole the hardest thing with Achilles tendon when you come back is you have to kind of give it little, how do you say this? I have a Dutch word in mind, but it's like you have to use it, but you cannot overuse it. And it's really a thin line that you're going on. So you have to do your exercises, which activates them. Then you can actually run with them. It's good for the tendons to run with them because they want to be used and they will start feeling better once you use them, but you don't want to overdo it. And finding that balance, if you go outside for a run, is way harder than if you do it on a treadmill with a lever. So that's really where it benefited me a lot.
Yeah, you're spot on, right? Especially the tendons, they want to be loaded while
Yeah.
they're in that recovery phase. So when you begin your return to run with lever, did you run at the same like 80% body weight, or where did
I
you
think
start
so.
there?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think it was around 80. It was also the first time I tried it, so it was really hard to know how I was supposed to feel. Like if you know how you're supposed to feel when you're fit, and then compared to that, I thought I was in pretty good shape because it makes running a bit easier, and I was like, oh, I feel pretty good. And then until I went for the first time outside. But I think that step in between, because the step from a bike to actually outside running is really, really big. And of course, you can do elliptical in between, but it's not the same thing because it's about that impact you get from jumping, right?
Mhm.
Um, and actually, in the gym, I was doing a lot of calf loading on the calf raise machine, and that was all going fine. But jumps, I couldn't do one leg jumps. And then, like, how can you go from not even being able to do one leg jumps to running outside? It's a really big step, and to have something in between that to bridge that just makes a lot of difference. And to actually train the system as normal, make the normal movement like running outside.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just kind of curious in your experience then, because you used Alter G earlier that summer. Did it feel essentially the same sensation, or was it a different sensation to the Alter G?
Yeah, I would say it's very similar. Um, it's it's a little bit easier to like adjust as well. So like in Alter G, it feels more natural with the lever. I would like to say, um, because in Alter G you really feel like you before you start you really feel like the pants is pulling you up, and like you're tiptoeing a little bit. And on the lever it's a bit easier to adjust and feel the ground contact. If you
Mm.
understand what I mean.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense to me. And I hear that feedback a lot too. But yeah, so as you're kind of using the tool for your return to run, um, uh, do you get the green light to go outside pretty quickly, or did you kind of use lever for the last remaining 3 weeks or so of your return?
Um, I used it mostly in those first 3 weeks of going back to running.
Mhm.
And then after that, I went to altitude, and I didn't bring it. So that was really my like throw in the deep end and go outside again. Um, and then I noticed that I struggled a little bit. So I think I was running at home. I was already running up to 100K, not only on the lever, but like a bit mixed. And then I was going back to 100K of just outside running. And then the tendons were fine, but it was mostly like the upper legs and the calves that had to get adjusted to the um, to the impact again.
Mhm.
Um, and then after that, well, I kind of still struggle with the tendons for a long time. It's also like a normal thing that you can actually feel good in running again, but then still wake up with like morning stiffness in the tendons. Um, and at that point, for me, it was both tendons. Um, so I think I struggled with it until January almost. So that was maybe 4 or 5 months, a really long time. But by then, I was already back at normal mileage.
Mhm.
It's just that I woke up every morning limping out of bed and needing 10 minutes to warm up before every run. But eventually, it went away.
Yeah, yeah, 4 months can probably feel like a long eternity if you're waking
Yeah,
up and feeling your Achilles every morning.
I,
Uh,
I I used to say that I was just getting old. I started at one point. I started making myself believe that I was just getting old. That had nothing to do with the tendons.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I felt my Achilles at like 5 a.m. this morning for some reason. I don't even have Achilles issues right now, so maybe we're all just getting old, right? Um,
Yeah, I guess that's it.
so I'd love to learn a little bit then too, because obviously you mentioned setbacks last year, and then leading into an Olympic year, you learned a lot last year, and you kind of made some changes in what you're doing now. With your coach and in your training program, like how are you incorporating lever now? I mean, you're healthy as of January, so 5 months or so, healthy again. How are you incorporating the lever system in your weekly training?
Well, I would say, for example, I was on training camp in South Africa in April, beginning of April, so that's a month ago. This was a bit for us a transition period, going back from base training to having spikes, doing sprints, doing more explosive stuff. And that's for me always a period where I have to be very careful. So my body seems to handle mileage no problem, slow stuff, threshold stuff no problem at all. I can really run a lot without problems. But then as soon as I put on spikes and start doing speed work, that's where I get calf issues. As I also had this time. So the last week of camp, I did one workout, basically our first big workout with spikes, and I got a problem in my calf. And I didn't have the lever with me, unfortunately, but I was only there for another week. So I could run and mostly slow stuff. But then after that, I kind of was thrown into starting racing directly. I had some races I had to do, went to China for a race as well. And especially around those races, I found it really like nice and good for me to have the lever. Especially I did a race in my hometown here. So I had the lever set up, did the race in the evening. I got a really, really bad reaction on my calf. Actually talked to my physiotherapist that evening, and he said, yeah, tomorrow, bike, no running. I was like, well, we'll see tomorrow morning. And then I actually ran an hour with the lever the next morning. And when I got out of bed, I was like, I could barely walk. So that was for me a really positive experience, and that's how I implement it now. So whenever I have a hard session in the evening, for example, and I wear spikes and I get some kind of reaction, I wake up the next morning not feeling totally fresh. I just go to the treadmill and run with the lever. And I think it's so easy, right? Because you have exactly the same training, I have the same heart rates. I usually put the treadmill a little bit faster to compensate a little bit for running with less body weight. But I run with the same heart rates. I have exactly the same feeling in everything except for like the calves or the upper legs. Everything gets a little bit less impact. So that's how I try to use it now. And I think first I was thinking when I got it the first time, I was like, I will go up from 100 miles or 160K to 200K now, or 120 miles, just by adding 2 runs on the lever. But I see now that it's better to replace one run outside and do it on the lever than to add runs on the lever, because then you just create more stress on the body.
Yeah. It's all about learning yourself too, right? And what works for
Yeah.
you. And but I think the way that you're implementing it right now, especially just kind of given still coming back from Achilles and calf issues and stuff, like, being able to offload the day after a hard workout makes, complete sense. It
Yeah.
keeps you running too, right? Sounds like you had some advice to bike that day or maybe even aqua jog, but you're able to still get your mileage in.
Yeah. And I feel sometimes that the running movement kind of speeds up the process of recovery as well. So if you really can't run, obviously, because you have pain, you have to do it on a bike. But the rest of the body recovers less if you go on a bike. So, say for example, I had a big reaction on the calf, but also on my upper legs. If I would have went on that bike that day, probably the calf would have been fine, but the upper legs would have got a lot of work to do anyway because I would have been on a bike. But by running on the lever, I didn't feel the calf. I could run for 60 minutes, but the upper legs were totally recovered after that. So I feel like runners especially, they want to run to also as a cool down, right? And if you do it in the pool or in a bike, it doesn't feel the same way.
Yeah, you almost need those runs to help your body recover. Yeah, totally
Yeah,
agree.
it's literally like that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, totally agree. So you mentioned European Champs is coming up. Is that your next race of the season?
I actually have a lot of races before that as well. So I haven't.
Impressive.
Yeah, it's 3 weeks to go, and I still have 3 races before. So no, I haven't really started my season yet because the season is going to be long. So I did go to China for a 5K in the Diamond League, but that was basically to secure some ranking points to have my place for Olympics secured. But that's now already 3 weeks ago. And then we decided to go back to training for 3 weeks, and now I'm gonna really start my racing season. So I'm doing 2 1,500 meters in the upcoming 7 days, and then a 5K at Oslo Diamond League about 9-10 days before Europeans, as like a last test race training before Europeans. So yeah, it's exciting races coming up.
That's exciting. Yeah. What's the best way for people to follow along with your season and what you have coming up?
I think it's gonna be Instagram, just my full name, and then you'll find me.
Yeah, and we'll link your profile in the show notes too. So,
Sure.
well, this is great, Mike. I really appreciate it. Excited for your season. Do you feel like you're ready to go now? You brought in
I
good shape?
am. Yeah. Yeah. I like I said, I struggle a little bit with the calf issue, but now when I went back to training the last 3 weeks, I've been really making good progress. So it's gonna be fun. I think you sometimes also need races to get to that peak shape. So I'm
Mhm.
just eager to get it started.
Yeah, there's nothing like sharpening the body with with a race, right? So the races
Exactly.
should be beneficial. You already have a national
Yep.
record again this year, right? The road 10K came a couple months ago.
Yeah. Yeah. That was not really like I didn't really look much at the record, but my coach said in that period it would be fun or interesting to see what I could do in a 10K. So it kind of came in between. So that was it was cool.
Nice little surprise. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's good to get a national record when you can. Well, Mike, again, appreciate it. Thank you for your time. And I loved learning what you had to say and how you've been incorporating the system. So really appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me.
3, 2, 1.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you're interested in learning more about incorporating the lever system into your training, follow us on Instagram at Lever Movement, or even follow me on Strava to learn how I incorporate lever into my training for ultras. Until next time, keep running.